Hello, I'm Mark Tucker.
Hey, I'm Alan Furstenberg. Welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Hey, good to see you, Alan.
Good to see you as well, Mark. We've had a couple of weeks where we've had some guest hosts on.
Yeah.
And while it's always great to get other people's perspectives, it is always fantastic just to be able to sit down and chat with you.
Yep, I miss chatting with you too.
So do I. Um, so today's was prompted by something you posted recently. You were talking about some ways you were using AI and as a developer, and not as part of your code, but more to help you do things with your code.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation recently on Voice Lunch where this topic came up as well. And I kind of voiced the opinion that these were tools and we needed to treat them as tools and use them as tools. And they can be powerful tools, but they were tools. So I thought we'd, take a little bit of time to talk about how we as developers, and very specifically as developers, can use some of these tools.
Yeah, that sounds good because what the challenge I was trying to solve today was that I had an API. I'm going through the design phase, and I needed to come up with a Swagger document. That some people may know it as Swagger, some people may know it as OpenAPI, not to be confused with OpenAI. But OpenAPI is a format. You can either do JSON or YAML to define. These are the different endpoints for your REST service. What's the HTTP verb? What does the request look like? Whether it's accepting things on query parameters or in a like a JSON body or some or something like that. And then what is the response coming back? And I had already kind of fleshed out the idea with TypeScript, so I had the different interface types already defined.
And I think it's also important to remember that while it's a really, really thorough specification,
Yes.
it's also really, really complicated.
Yeah, it can be. It's because you can specify all kinds of things. You can get down to the point where you're defining if something's required or not, if what the data type is.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
so there's a lot to, simple things are simple,
yeah,
but complicated things really can get complicated quickly.
yeah, and I've done this before, and this is something I do infrequently, which is kind of a good candidate for me. But like the last time I did this, there was an editor for Swagger, very nice. You could type it, type into it, get IntelliSense, and it would help you, you know, figure it out. There's a code window on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side would be a preview of what your Swagger document would look like hosted on a web page. So I've used that before, but it turns out then a lot of times I feel like I'm just kind of hand coding it, and I knew I had pretty much all of the information or most of the information that I would need in the types, because with TypeScript you can define something as being required or optional, and you can define different data types. That's kind of where I started out, and I like there might be a way, and instead of like searching and trying to find like TypeScript to Swagger converter or something like that, which there probably is something. I just had my ChatGPT open already, for whatever I use it for on a day-to-day basis. And so I just thought, well, hey, I wonder how hard that would be to create a prompt, and how good it would be. I'll kind of walk through the TypeScript types here, but basically the prompt was using the following types, create an OpenAPI 3.03 JSON. That was the prompt, and then I pasted um, the values. So I just have one type called my request and one type my response. That was just how I was going through the sample anyway. And this is actually what would be maybe a schema for defining an NLU service. So you're going to take in some utterance and an optional threshold. That's what TypeScript does for optional here, an optional number for some sort of a threshold. And it's going to come back with a response, which includes what the input was, which is going to be the same thing as the utterance. Inside the intent, where does this, or what the intent name is, and some matching probability, and an array of some possible slot values. And so then the slot values is the intended entity, which is the value and the start and end number somewhere, like the position inside the string, what the raw value was, what the slot name was, and some value information. So that's we've got a little bit of complexity. Everything's required on this object. On this object, everything's required except for intent name is not. And on the request, everything, the utterance is required, but the threshold is optional. So that's how I started out with the prompt, and it happily came through and generated this specification for me. In some cases, it's added descriptions that weren't there, because my TypeScript didn't have any descriptions. It made up an endpoint by looking at what the type was. It says, oh, there's an utterance in the request, so I'm going to call this process utterance. I figured out, because I had a request JSON object or request TypeScript object interface, that it was going to be a post. And so then here's the request body, and it's just basically using my types as the different schemas. For the request has my request schema, and it's required. The response uses my response schema, and then it's defining some of the different responses. So like my request has an utterance, which is of type string, a threshold, which is of type number, and it guessed that it was going to be a format between the values of 0 and 1. So it just inferred that because I said threshold, I guess.
No, that's interesting to me. So it's kind of, I mean, I would say it's making this up. It lacked information, so it just invented something, which is fine, because you can certainly change that yourself later. This was enough to get you started, though. But that kind of thing is interesting. And then we see it again coming down with range. It defines it as an integer further down. So that's kind of interesting. Even and here, even though it's range, it doesn't specify beginning and end, does it? Oh no, required start and end. Okay.
Yeah, start and end, and then it's so it's saying that it's requiring them a start and end, and it just from the TypeScript number, it's figured out, oh, this is an integer of N32, and this one's just because I specified a number, it's saying that it's a number of type float. So here's just other values are string. Here's an object, which includes a kind and a value of type string, and those are required. Then on the bigger object, the entity, the range, the raw value, the slot name, and the value are all required. In the response, it's got an input, an intent, and it's got a intent name and probability, and it's saying that, where we go here, and then this is an array of slots, and it's saying that the input, the intent, and the slots are required. That's that's pretty much it. But it kind of figured that out, and so I was able to just take that as is and open up my Swagger editor, which has some nice IntelliSense and stuff in it. Paste it in here and just go over and take a look and see what it looked like. Now you can see here where it says here's my 3 different types: my request, my slot, my response. You can see that I've marked some of these with a red asterisk, meaning that they're required, whereas threshold's not required, and in the response, the intent name's not required, but it has all this nice formatting. So one of the nice features of Swagger is that you can provide some examples. Like, here's one, turn on the lights, and the other one is increase the volume. Volume up, and it's got specifying a threshold. So I wanted to go ahead and do that. So I did a follow-up query. So my prompt was add request examples for turn on the lights and volume up. The last one has a threshold of 0.8. And so it regenerated. But in the regenerated, it decided it was going to truncate some things. And so it just put a little comment in here. So then all I did was like include full JSON. And so then it went through and generated the whole thing, was able to pop that in there. And I've got a sample, and it just, took a few minutes. So it saved a lot of time, and coupled with a tool that would validate, because this one has like schema validation, if this matches the specification or the schema for what an OpenAPI document looks like. So this tool includes that, where ChatGPT doesn't. But just kind of pairing those things together, I was able to get this done in just a few minutes as opposed to something that could have taken a half hour. So what do you think?
So that was pretty cool. I'll be honest. I am a big skeptic when it comes to using these tools for code generation for various generation things. But there was a case where it generated something. It did need a little bit of review because you wanted to make sure some of the types came out correct. But certainly that, as you said, saves a lot of tedium.
Yeah.
And made it so that it was now easy for you to validate and easy for you to review and kind of make sure everything matched what you expected it to be. And that's good. And there are people who use tools like Microsoft's Copilot or Google's Duet AI, which is being renamed to Gemini, to help design database schemas or to write chunks of code and make sure they fit in. And I think those all make sense to a point.
Yeah.
And, I feel like they're good when you can clearly specify what you want. And you did in this case, because you were doing something that these systems are really good at. You're transforming from one thing into another equivalent thing.
Yeah.
So you could say, here's something concrete. I want this other concrete thing. And these models are good at that. Being a little more amorphous, if you had gone in and said, I need an OpenAPI specification that will, take a person and a range, and, my guess is that it would not do as well.
Right. Yeah.
It would still do okay, but not do as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are some cases where it's easier for it to generate correct stuff, and there's other times where it doesn't. So but I have found lots of different cases where I'm wanting to write just a small function that does something, and I can specify that I want it in JavaScript or TypeScript or some other language. I can flip flop between different languages if I want to. I can say, well, what would that look like if I use the Axios library instead of fetch, or prod it along to get to the point where it's helping kind of get to where the code where I want it to be. Now, could have I done that? Sure, I could have, but before, if I'm like, I don't remember the syntax of blah, blah, blah. So then I would have to go someplace. I'd have to Google and then find the documentation. I'd have to go through a lot of different results to try to figure out the thing that might answer the question that I have. But then I'd have to read through the documentation because the documentation is like written in a certain way, but maybe my question's a little bit different. Whereas I found that a lot of times I can ask questions and kind of prod it to get to a point where it's generating things. And obviously you want to test code, and I don't do it for like large chunks of code. But if I want to, a function that does a certain thing, or just kind of help me out, then it does save some time. It does make different parts of my day quicker if I use it.
I will certainly say that I find myself asking these systems questions, and my general take is that if I have a problem that I almost get but can't quite wrap my head around, but I can describe it well enough, I will describe it to both Gemini and GPT and compare the two answers.
Well, that's interesting. I haven't really done that before, but that.
And part of the reason I do that, part of it is because I want to evaluate these two systems to see how well they work. But part of it also is that my questions notoriously get wrong answers. And I can assure you, whenever I do that, one or the other one will give me a wrong answer.
Oh, interesting.
I almost never get completely correct answers. Now, both of them will get really close, but they'll still give, in some cases, very subtle errors that they trip up on. I've gotten a case where in one, I needed it to be converting something to text as part of this was in TypeScript, convert something to text as part of an asynchronous loop. I don't even remember the correct terminology. And the suggestion it gave back worked. Both of them gave me this loop, but one of them told me that I needed to send it through a buffer. And in encoding the buffer, something got messed up. And, it took me a while to realize that's what was happening. So I like I said, I'm a skeptic.
Well, and that's good, because I think, like in the end, as a developer, you're responsible for the code that you turn in, and you do need to lend at least a little bit of eye of skepticism. Now, over time, if things if things are progressively, consistently correct, which could be over time, then I can see where maybe we're less skeptical, or maybe there's tools that pair code generation with some sort of a validator.
So two things on the first point about we're responsible, and that healthy skepticism is there. Yes, and in fact, one of the things I think that's important is that not only should we be asking once we get a result back, we need to make sure we understand the code.
Yes.
We can't just have it generate something that we don't understand as developers. That's really kind of an obligation on our part. But that's true of any code that we're looking at, I think. As for, do we start trusting it more and more? I'm the skeptic here, and I know it. But I wouldn't. And part of the reason I wouldn't is that one of the things that we're seeing about these systems, the LLM systems in general, is that they're only really as good as the training material. And they've already kind of snarfed up all of Stack Overflow. They've got all of Stack Overflow. They've got all of the open source code on GitHub. There's not much more they can get. And increasingly, code is going to be written with LLM systems.
Yeah.
So they're increasingly being trained on generated code, which we've seen, and there are papers on this that indicate that these models, when they're trained on generated language, get progressively worse.
Yeah, I can see that. Again,
I'm the skeptic. I would be cautious about trusting them too much, even as you start getting familiar with it. Don't let your guard down.
Yeah, no, definitely don't let your guard down. What you could see over time as well is that, maybe you're a bigger organization, and you've got code repos and coding standards and other things that maybe the results that get generated are more highly biased towards what your company standards are.
This is actually something I think is pretty interesting. Now, one of the issues is that a lot of, all of this training material that they're using right now is coming from the public internet. So when you ask for a suggestion, or when you're trying to do code completion, it's got a very, very limited context window that it's drawing from. So it doesn't necessarily look like your code, or call functions that you may have somewhere else in the code, or know what the best practice is. With Gemini 1.5, I'm seeing a lot of people are doing things like taking their open source projects and dumping the entire project into Gemini 1.5 in a single context, and then asking questions, or asking it, does this function work? Where's the security vulnerability? And the results are mixed, but generally favorable. It's slow. It's not going to do code completion for you very well or very quickly, at least not right now. But it's an intriguing thought that if you give it all of your code, you can ask questions about all of your code. I mean, I know that when I'm tackling code, even my code that I've been very familiar with for decades, I will say things like, what is this function doing? What is this method doing? It's calling a superclass and then doing this, and why did I do this? Under what circumstances will this get called? And then work on it from there. And I think that's one of the elements that I'm really interested in seeing how these tools evolve to. And I understand there are some tools out there now that start to do this.
Yeah, kind of like to a smaller scale, another way that I use, and I have used tools like Copilot. I've had that turned on in my editor, but I don't always want it to be generating code. It's not, there's sometimes when I want to be in my flow, and there's sometimes when I have a question about a specific thing. So that didn't really work with my rhythm. So having something like ChatGPT, or or other systems out there, like there's lots of different options that you can choose. Just kind of in a side window and asking questions what I want, that seems to work well. And one of the ways that I do use it is sometimes it's if I'm looking at a piece of code and I'm like, oh, I'm not familiar with this syntax here. And I can ask a question, what does this, what does this syntax mean? Or even if it's something that's brand new that I haven't done before, maybe it's in a different language or it's a different set of libraries, and I've got a code sample, I can pop that class in there and say, explain what this does. And so then it helps me kind of start thinking, oh, okay, this part does this part does this, and then I can either ask follow-up questions or I can go search about something else that I need. But it is helpful to kind of have somebody explain some code to you if it's brand new to you.
No, exactly. One of the things that I've seen with both Gemini and with Copilot is again this integrated sidebar. So instead of going to ChatGPT and pasting in all the relevant stuff, the Duet or the Copilot is right there next to you. It has direct access to your code already. So when you say something like, I'm getting a runtime error, this, and this online,
Yeah.
whatever, here's the stack trace. Why is it doing that? It can say, oh, if you go look at this line, that means that that's 0, and that's only going to happen under these circumstances. You can start getting that integrated conversation with the model, and really, really good developers know how to start tracking that down.
Yeah.
But that's also know how to start tracking that down.
Yeah.
This is a case where it's something that can help you narrow in on it a lot quicker, I think. And if it doesn't today, it's that's where the technology is going. And to be honest, those sorts of elements of the tool excite me a lot more than I'm going to write code.
Yeah.
Because this is where it will help you find things. One of the concepts that I feel like recently we have been seeing these debates on LinkedIn and elsewhere about how programming is going to be obsolete within 1 year, 5 year, whatever. And I feel like the people who are saying this don't understand what programmers do.
Yeah.
They think that programmers write code. They don't realize that's not what we do.
That's one of the things we do.
Well, I wouldn't even say it's one of the things that we do. I look at it as programmers, as developers, we are solving problems.
Yep.
Coding is a tool that we use to solve the problems. But and yes, in order to do that, we need to write the code. We need to use the tool.
Yeah.
But what we do is solve problems. That's a different mindset.
Yeah.
And if someday it means we're going to be solving those problems by speaking in a human language, great. But it doesn't take away we need to think about how to do that. It doesn't take away the need to diagnose issues, the need to analyze, the need to think and plan, and all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
The programming, that's just kind of the end result. The rest of it is what we do.
Yeah, it's definitely the part of a bigger solution, because just programming doesn't do anything for anybody. It doesn't help anybody. Just writing code doesn't help anybody. It's writing code as part of a solution, and it's understanding the requirements, and it's fitting into the constraints of the device or the systems, or
the capabilities. It's knowing what you can do and knowing how to do that.
Yep.
It's thinking logically, thinking how to break down a problem into smaller components that you can tackle. It's all of these things.
Yeah, and it's also continuing learning new things, new libraries, new languages, new, techniques. So, if I stuck with what my first programming job was out of college, I would still be programming in COBOL.
Right,
Nothing wrong with that. Um,
you know,
but
I IBM has built a system that is trained on COBOL
yeah,
for, obvious reasons.
so there's still lots of code out there, but so you always have to learn something new. And so any way that these tools can help you, learn the things that you need to do or to progress or to answer questions or to in the end do your job as a whole, then treat it like a tool, and like any tool, be careful how you use the tool or when you use the
That,
tool or where.
that's an excellent way to put it.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear what people are doing. I know there are lots of systems out there. Which are your favorite to use?
Yep.
How do you use them? Leave comments in the comment section below, or find us on LinkedIn. And I have a feeling we're going to be returning to this another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two voice steps. Take care, Alan.
Take care, Mark. Have a great week.